So at the start, this video was supposed to be all about The Lion King and Disney remakes, but eventually turned into something else entirely. See, this is how the video was supposed to start.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Browntable, and this video is sponsored by Audible, so go to audible.com/browntable and use the code Browntable, or text Browntable to 500-500 to get 1 free audiobook, 2 free Audible originals, and a 30-day free trial.
But now it's a little different because the internet exploded because of Spider-Man, again, because Disney and Sony's contract with the fictional hero fell through. And now Spider-Man is still technically in the MCU, but cannot be connected to it in his films unless, I'm guessing, another contract is formed. This video was supposed to be a fun video about The Lion King, about Disney, roasting Disney a little bit, but now sadly it's become a little more cynical.
Disney wanted a 50-50 co-financing agreement in the new contract, which means that Disney and Sony pay to produce the film, and then they get 50-50 back with, box office results and everything like that. Previously, Disney only got 5% of the first dollar gross. Now that might not sound like much, 5%, but you have to remember that Disney already owns the merchandising rights for Spider-Man. If you think most of the money comes from films, I'm sorry, but you're wrong, because, even in 2014, The Hollywood Reporter reported that Spider-Man merchandise alone, worldwide, made $1.3 billion, and that was 5 years ago. So imagine how much money Disney earns from Spider-Man alone now. And in the new contract, Disney supposedly wanted 50-50 co-financing agreement for not just Spider-Man films, but for all the Spider-Man universe that Sony has. Which means Venom 2, a Morbius sequel if it ever gets made, the Silver Sable and Black Cat ideas they had, and I don't know if this touches Spider-Verse. The Hollywood Reporter later posted an article that stated that Disney was able to let go of 20%, and they were okay with a 30-70 co-financing agreement, but just giving up 30% of the most financially successful character is insane for Sony. For example, if they went with the 50-50 co-financing agreement with Disney, that means that they pay, 50% of the production cost to make the movie, but they only get 50% back. Spider-Man Far From Home made $1 billion. If the contract was made before then, that means that Sony would have only gotten $500 million. Now, even Sony's least successful live-action Spider-Man movie made $700 million, which means that this technically would be a massive loss for Sony, and just a win for Disney because they get more money. Disney then pushed for 30%, and Sony was like, no, 25%. And I think that's still a lot, and it's just contracts, man. And let's not forget, and this is really important actually, because I don't think a lot of people know this, Sony doesn't get any money from movies with Spider-Man in them, which means that Sony never got any money from Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. Sony only gets movies that have Spider-Man as the main character, Spider-Man in the title, which means Homecoming and Far From Home, and then subsequently Disney doesn't get as much money from those movies. And that's what it comes down to. Money.
Stop right there. It's August 24th, and we have new news. Supposedly, reported by Deadline again, Disney actually offered Sony a 25% stake from the start, which were films that Kevin Feige and Marvel got involved in. Let's not forget that Kevin Feige actually helped Sony behind the scenes on Venom, which means that if this contract was made before the film came out, Sony would only receive 75% of the earnings. Supposedly, Disney wanted a 25-75 co-financing stake, and Sony had that offer on the table for half a year, until Disney then came back with a 50-50 co-financing contract. Why? Maybe Disney saw how huge Spider-Man Far From Home became and wanted more. It's also Sony's fault for sleeping on a contract on their most important character, and this video is about Disney, but let's not forget that Sony is a gigantic mess. Either way, there's supposed common ground at 25%, so why these companies are debating this is very strange.
Now, this isn't to say that Sony and Disney are evil, necessarily. They're just invested in themselves and they want to grow as companies, as corporations, and it's up to you if you perceive that as malicious. And surprisingly, and I don't think a lot of people know this, but you can actually enjoy Disney products while still thinking that Disney is maybe a bit too big and maybe owns a bit too much of the entertainment industry. Disney can't be classified as a monopoly, and we still have, Warner Brothers, Sony, Paramount, and Universal out there competing. They're not doing great, but they're competing. If there's anyone to support, it's the creators, because Disney and Sony obviously just hire people to make these movies. They only care about the income these movies make, but the people who actually make these movies are the ones that should care about these characters and, work with them. And the actors they come in and bring these characters to life, they are the true victims here. And Disney now has Fox, they have Hulu, they have Star Wars, they have the MCU, of course. Disney Entertainment is very varied, but they try to stick to their franchises. And that's what this video was supposed to be about originally, Disney's remake culture and how they remake all these films, but without what made the original films special. So, to talk about Disney, remake culture, and more specifically The Lion King, I went to the School of Visual Arts in New York to talk to Jimmy Calhoun, who is the chair of the Computer Animation and Visual Effects program in the school. And so, let's have at it.
Well, will you look at that. I was editing this thing and wham! Disney Plus arrived and a bunch of shows were announced. I will say that the interview you will see after this little segment happened before the Disney Plus announcement, and I was a bit disappointed and uninterested in what Disney Plus had to offer, but now seeing shows like The Mandalorian look a lot more creative than I thought, as well as shows like Ms. Marvel and Moon Knight being announced, I'm pleasantly surprised, and I hope that Disney doesn't tamper with the visions the writers and directors of said shows have for them. I do sincerely hope that the shows feel like shows made by the directors, and not the company and corporation behind them. Anyways, on to the interview.
I'm here with Jimmy Calhoun. Jimmy Calhoun is the VFX and computer animation chair. You are, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I didn't get some random guy. The VFX and animation chair from the School of Visual Arts in New York City, and we're going to be talking about remake culture, The Lion King, and so I wanted to talk to you about remake culture first, and essentially because, films are always being remade, and it's not that it's a problem, it depends on the film and what the filmmakers are trying to do with it.
There's pros and cons.
Yeah, there's the comic book Judge Dredd. They made a movie about Judge Dredd with Sylvester Stallone, and they made a new one with Carl Urban, just called Dredd, just to make it more edgy. And that one was much better than the original, most people would say, which not only adds but improves upon its predecessor, right? But there's also these newer type of remakes that want to essentially imitate the predecessor, but not really add anything new to it.
Right.
They want the audience to be engaged in nostalgia. Upcoming Disney remakes.
Is it weird that this exercise thing is in the shot?
The exercise? Oh, like the yoga mat?
Yeah. Is that weird?
No, I mean, I have like 2 yoga mats at home.
Okay. No, I like that you brought up nostalgia. I think it's what they're after, right? So they can get people of my generation to come see a movie because we're nostalgic for The Lion King or Dumbo or whatever. And so I want to go see it because I remember loving The Lion King when it first came out and thinking it was an amazing film. And now I can take my kids to see The Lion King. Right.
So there's like a bunch of Disney remakes that are being made. There's Lady and the Tramp, Little Mermaid, Snow White, Cruella de Vil, Pinocchio, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Prince Charming, Oliver Twist, James and the Giant Peach, Tink, Peter Pan, The Sword in the Stone, and Lilo and Stitch. It's a lot.
I want to love these films because I want our alumni to be successful. I want our students to be successful in the year.
Yeah.
I think that the work that they're doing is pretty amazing. It's pretty outstanding, like what they're able to achieve visually. But then content-wise, it's
right.
a little
I don't
impressive.
think
there's nothing new.
Yeah. On this, in like what we're talking about, we're not trying to insult the visual effects scene because we both enjoy visual effects. That's kind of like what we're doing. I think the biggest problem is that, of course, even visual effects artists that I know are, frustrated that they worked in the Emoji Movie because it's not a good movie, but it's their job, and I feel like we are trying to improve the movie and not essentially the visual effects aspect because if you see The Lion King looks amazing.
Right.
And I think that's another reason why people are saying it's live action because it looks so real. Right. But I feel like by making it live action, they also take away some aspects that made the original great, which is the cartooniness and the expression that the characters can bring. And it kind of eventually ends up harming the film more than helping it, in my opinion.
So I watched it with my daughters. The 5-year-old, the whole time, she just kept being like, which lion is that?
Yeah.
She couldn't tell them apart.
Simba and Nala.
And then even the older female lions,
If it wasn't for Beyonce's voice, you just can't tell.
Right.
You just can't tell at all. Yeah. There's a meme going on with Simba when Simba's father dies, Mufasa. Scar kills him, and it's like people have already leaked the video by piracy, which is, you know, don't do piracy. You see Simba yelling out to his father, and it just looks like this lion opening its mouth, and you hear.
Right.
You don't feel that emotion. Even from the trailers at the beginning, you see when Simba's father dies, and Simba's like cradling his body, and then Scar comes over, and he says, "Run away, Simba," you know, and then his face is completely emotionless. The reason we don't feel any type of emotion from that scene, other than like, oh, well, his dad died, so we should kind of feel bad for him, is because we can't really engage with the characters because they have no expressions. Another big deal with being live action is that you try to emulate kind of like the realistic look of Africa.
Right.
But it's weird because Africa looks a lot prettier and colorful than like what they showcased.
Right.
It kind of looked desaturated to me.
I mean, I've never been to Africa.
Yeah, like from the images on
From National
Shutterstock.
Geographic.
Oh, National Geographic too. Owned by Disney now.
With 2D animation, right? With where animation came from, the reason that the 12 principles of animation came into existence was because Disney was trying to emulate life, right? You're trying to create what they call the illusion of life. They knew that it couldn't be extremely lifelike, that to have an audience interested and to believe that this drawing is coming to life, you had to throw in exaggeration. You had to like make sure there's anticipation, like all these different principles that they gave to it that maybe doesn't always happen in real life, but helps you as a viewer understand that these drawings are representing life. And I think that the same thing happens with colors. So artistically, in the original Lion King, you exaggerate the color. So maybe Africa isn't as bright and red and vibrant as those paintings were, but that's the Africa that we feel like we know and understand. So then when you actually have realistic animation or possibly realistic colors, again, not knowing what Africa looks like, we're like, that's not Africa. That's not, those animals aren't moving realistically. They're totally moving realistically, but I don't know. I think that the exaggeration that exists in the originals is there to make us feel that they're lifelike.
In the Jungle Book, they used mocap. They were also more realistic in the way they expressed themselves, even though they had more animalistic features. But in The Lion King, they did use mocap.
Yeah.
So it's just, that's why when you watch the movie, it kind of looks like just the mouths are flapping. Deepfakes, though. There's this artist that created stills from the Lion King remake, but with, you know, actual cartoony faces and made it look as real as possible.
Right.
And someone deepfaked that by adding those cartoony faces into the film. Have you seen that?
I have not seen that, but that sounds like a really fun
cool
use of deepfake.
Yeah, it looks really cool.
I haven't really thought all this through. I think that there's a lot going on with semiotics, with remakes in general. The basic idea of semiotics is that you have a sign that represents something else. A very basic example of semiotics is a rose. So you have a rose, and if you see a rose, you might think love. But the rose doesn't say love, but it represents love. With these remakes, we're suddenly representing the original, right? So the new Lion King film signifies the original Lion King film. But also you have this film representing real life. So are they succeeding at representing real life? Yes. Are they succeeding at representing the original film? I don't know the reason for doing it, other than to make money, to play on the nostalgia.
The original was made in a way for a reason.
Right.
And now it's being made because we can. Say, like, take the Aladdin movie. If you've seen Guy Ritchie's films, the director's Guy Ritchie, and it does not really feel like a Guy Ritchie film at certain points.
It doesn't feel like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking
No, it's weird. It feels very neuter.
Yeah.
For example, Marvel's Phase 4. People are saying it's very, diverse and intense and, whoa, it's such a risk. But it's not. It's not at all. It's like
it's a proven brand of its own.
It's a proven
That's
brand.
That's why
right?
they bought Fox. It's a proven brand.
So people are just I forget where in New York. But again, it's kind of like Disney's properties, right?
Yeah.
So focusing on Marvel, it's a proven brand. People who are already invested in the Marvel universe will not watch those movies.
Right.
On the whole nostalgia thing, like you have Disney Plus, which is coming out, and Disney Plus is like this massive thing where you're having all these old properties in there. So it's like, boom, you like this old stuff, here you go. And they take like Home Alone,
Right.
they're gonna reboot it,
Right.
and it's like, whoa, another remake, crazy. So it's more stuff like that.
And there's no room for people with new ideas and stories to tell.
If there are new ideas, it's always based on a brand. And I feel like there's, at a certain point, you also have to take risks and stuff, but, for example, Disney took a risk with this movie, A Wrinkle in Time. It didn't do well.
It wasn't a great film,
Yeah,
unfortunately. I love the director, I love the book.
Yeah, but it's just, people were saying like, oh man, like, Disney took a risk and it was The Wrinkle in Time, and people didn't go to see that, but people didn't go to see that because visually didn't look great and the movie is bad.
Right.
It's not really
It's
a bad
unfortunate.
risk. Yeah. And when Disney takes like a risk with like a film like, in their animated films department with, Moana, Zootopia,
Right.
those movies make like a boatload of bucks,
Yeah, it was really interesting because those are not based on a book
those
or
are
anything.
not based on anything.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Moana's based on something, but I know Zootopia is completely original,
Yeah.
which is pretty crazy. And then Rich Moore went to Sony Animation, which should maybe tell you something,
Well, and there too, so Spider-Verse
Yeah.
is based on something, so that
Right.
was a surefire. Like, they knew that they would make their money back because it's Marvel, it's something that we already know. But they did really cool, new, interesting things visually with it.
Right.
So their risk-taking was
The visual aspect.
The visual aspect of it. They did a wonderful job.
It's interesting to see like all these companies having to reshuffle like how they work because of how much of a monopoly Disney is.
Right.
It technically can't be classified as a monopoly, but it is. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
we're not saying don't sue us, but like,
Please.
yeah. So that it's weird because they have so much of the market now. Essentially, it's like they're getting their new streaming service, and it's like, what happens to Netflix, HBO?
I'm excited for Netflix. I mean, they are building up the animation.
They really
arm
are.
there.
That's great.
Yeah.
I noticed that with Next, this thing they're doing, and X, I don't know, it's like mostly more pop culture, entertainment oriented,
Yeah.
and they seem to be releasing all their animation and anime stuff through that, which is really cool.
Yeah, but they're building an animation studio, and they're
really?
hiring all these. Which, to be fair, like they're making some safe bets too. They're hiring Ben Keane to come in and make something. All these different filmmakers that have succeeded before.
Kevin Smith.
Yeah. But they are trying to bring in some new voices and younger artists as well, and giving them room to create something. I think that they saw Disney was going to pull their content, right?
More of the cartoons, most of them are completely original, from what I've noticed. And you have like, I think BoJack Horseman is only on Netflix.
Yeah.
You have
Birdie and Toucan Birdie.
Yeah, Toucan Birdie,
which
yeah.
unfortunately got canceled.
got canceled.
But yeah, so the new animation studio that they created, and they brought in all these great artists. It's all original content that they're creating. Yeah. So that's pretty exciting. So there's this one theorist, Walter Benjamin, who wrote an essay called Art in the Age of Reproduction. One of the points that he makes is how meaning is lost as you reproduce the same image over and over. So some of the essence that's in the original isn't there by the time you have copied it. By the 30th copy of it, you've lost the original artist's touch, right?
Right.
And I think that you absolutely lose, as you remake these films, you lose some of the original essence of the films.
So what do you think Disney should do when, continuing these live action remake projects? Because they're not going to stop.
No.
Right?
And if I were a shareholder, I wouldn't want them to stop.
Yeah, exactly. It's too much money in the bank, essentially. And not to say that Disney is evil, but they are a company, and companies need money.
Sure.
And it's not like that's a bad thing,
Yeah.
but it also is kind of like sometimes it impedes creativity a bit.
I think it impedes some parts of the creative process. The storytelling aspect of it, that's being impeded, right? Original ideas, original content.
Do you think the visuals are more being impeded, or the storytelling process, like the filmmaking side of it?
Yeah, I think the filmmaking side, the storytelling is being impeded, while the visual process is actually getting a boost. Yeah, like I think that they're coming up with new ways to create films. So the virtual production process that they created using the virtual cameras to film the live-action Lion King is really amazing and interesting, and I'd love to see what can be done with that, with a new story. The new Disney films don't feel like there's an intent on trying to find where the magic was in the original. It's just, let's recreate it because we can. I've said this a million times now. I'm so happy that these studios exist and they're hiring our friends and our alumni, and that they're moving forward this art form and finding new techniques. I think it's really exciting. I just wish that there would be some new content as well. So yeah, that's how I feel about Disney remakes. Are you listening to me?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's just that I was listening to my audiobook on Audible.
Check this out. Audible members can choose 3 titles every month, 1 audiobook and 2 Audible originals you can't hear anywhere else. Audible members also get exclusive audio fitness programs, and that's something I need to get on. See, members get a credit every month, which can essentially let them buy an audiobook free of charge. And if you don't use your credits, unused credits roll over to the next month. And if you didn't like your audiobook, you can exchange it, no questions asked. And Audible has the largest selection of audiobooks on the planet, and now with Audible Originals, the selection has gotten even more custom with content made for members. You can listen to bestsellers, motivational stories, informational stories, thrillers, memoirs, and more. An audiobook I'd recommend is Your Career in Animation: How to Survive and Thrive, written by David B. Levy. It talks about the importance of studying animation fundamentals, the process of being an animator, and creating a network with fellow artists, and I highly recommend this book, as well as The Life and Times of Ward Kimball, to any aspiring animator.
So remember, go to audible.com/Browntable and use the code Browntable, or text Browntable to 500-500 to get 1 free audiobook, 2 free Audible originals, and a 30-day free trial. Thank you so much, Jimmy, for being here. This was really fun.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Hey Chads, thanks so much for watching this video. I hope I didn't sound like an insane cynic who hates Disney. I'm just trying to see everything from a very neutral point of view. I want to thank the patrons for making this video possible. It was very tough to make. Hopefully you noticed the production level go up a bit. And anyways, I'm definitely debating whether or not to call you all Chads or Chairs, as I've gotten a good amount of people saying they like being a Chad, while a good amount say that they don't want to be a Chad. And in general, being a chair makes a lot of sense considering this channel is called Browntable, so please let me know. Thanks again for coming to the table, and I'll see you all next time.